The Earth's magnetic shield is vanishing. For decades, the prophecies of a quiet man from Kentucky, Edgar Cayce, were archived as esoteric fiction. They were the strange ramblings of a sleeping prophet. But today, scientists are pulling data from the sky that mirrors his visions with terrifying accuracy. Researchers using the European Space Agency swarm satellites are now seeing the planet's most vital defense system, its magnetic field, thinning and weakening at a rate that defies their own models. What Cayce saw in his trance-like states is no longer a fringe theory. It's becoming our measurable, unfolding reality. If you believe there is truth hidden in the noise, subscribe for what's coming. These aren't just stories, they are warnings. The official world dismissed Cayce. They called him a charlatan. They said his claims were too vague, too easily interpreted after the fact. But the data is now confirming his most impossible claims. We're not talking about vague predictions. We're talking about 7 specific, verifiable events that science can no longer ignore. The first prediction, the pole shift. In 1936, Cayce was asked about the great changes coming to the Earth in the new millennium. His answer was simple: a shifting of the poles, beginning around 2000 to 2001. Geologists laughed. They knew a geomagnetic reversal takes millennia. But here is the scientific validation. The European Space Agency and Johns Hopkins University are now tracking a vast, growing anomaly in the South Atlantic. It's a dent in our magnetic field, a sprawling zone of weakness where the protection from solar radiation is alarmingly low. The magnetic North Pole is no longer crawling. It's sprinting towards Siberia at a velocity that forced emergency updates to global positioning systems. The rate of decay is 10 times faster than previously thought. The official models are failing. The contradiction isn't in the data. It's in the interpretation. Scientists call it a geomagnetic excursion. They say it's a normal cycle. Cayce called it a planetary cleansing, a prelude to a new age. The unsettling reversal is that the very data used to dismiss him is now the evidence that confirms his timeline. The second prediction, the Essenes. Long before modern archaeology could confirm their existence, Cayce spoke of a mysterious Jewish sect. In over 170 different readings, he described their communal lives, their spiritual practices, their healing temples, and their hidden knowledge. Historians of his time barely acknowledged them, considering them a fringe group lost to the sands of time. It was a fantasy. But here is the scientific validation. In 1947, 2 years after Cayce's death, a Bedouin shepherd stumbled upon a cave near the Dead Sea. Inside were the Dead Sea Scrolls. As scholars translated the fragments, a stunning picture emerged. The detailed account of a thriving community, a sect that called themselves the Essenes. The scrolls validated Cayce's fantasies with chilling precision, confirming details he could not have known through any conventional means. The contradiction is impossible to ignore. History, as written in the 1930s, said the Essenes were a lost footnote. Cayce said they were the keepers of a sacred truth that would one day be rediscovered. The scrolls proved him right, forcing a complete revision of our understanding of the period. The reversal is that the greatest archaeological find of the 20th century was predicted by a man in a trance decades before the first fragment was found. The third prediction, blood as a diagnostic tool. In 1927, Cayce made an impossible claim. During a reading for a man suffering from a physical ailment, he stated, "The day may yet arrive when one may take a drop of blood and diagnose the condition of any physical body." To the medical establishment of the 1920s, this was pure science fiction. Diagnosis was a matter of observation and rudimentary tests. But here is the scientific validation. Today, we live in that world. A single vial of blood, run through a modern lab, can reveal hundreds of biomarkers, from genetic predispositions for disease to the earliest molecular signs of cancer. Microfluidics and advanced spectrometry are making Cayce's vision a reality. The contradiction is that the biggest medical fraud of the 21st century, Theranos, was built on the false promise of Cayce's exact vision. The world was scammed by a false version of the prophecy, all while the real one was quietly coming true in accredited labs around the world. The deeper reversal is that the technology Cayce foresaw is now being used to map the very genetic code that determines our health, a level of detail unimaginable in his time. The fourth prediction, the stock market crash of 1929. In February 1925, Cayce warned a physician to exercise extreme caution in the face of adverse forces that will come then in 1929. For years later, in March 1929, 6 months before the world economy collapsed, he warned a New York stockbroker of a great disturbance in financial circles and a considerable break and bear market. Here is the scientific validation. On October 29, 1929, Black Tuesday, the stock market crashed. The Great Depression began. Cayce had predicted the precise year and the nature of the event. The contradiction is that economists today still debate the exact causes. But Cayce saw it as something deeper, a spiritual reckoning, a consequence of greed and materialism. The markets are a mirror, and what they reflect is our own unresolved greed. The reversal is that the world learned nothing. The same patterns repeated in 2008 in the dot-com bubble, in every financial crisis since. The data changes, the names change, but the cycle remains. Cayce said the problem wasn't the system. It was the human heart. The fifth prediction, World War II. In 1935, Cayce gave a reading that described an entire world at war. He warned of catastrophic events building within the international community. Here is the scientific validation. He specifically predicted the Axis alliance for years before World War II began, stating that the Austrians, Germans, and later the Japanese would join in their influence. He saw the rise of militaristic groups and the fire that would consume the world. The contradiction is that Cayce did not see this as an unchangeable destiny. He warned that the war was not inevitable. It was a choice. The world chose. And the prophecy came true, not because it was written in stone, but because we wrote it ourselves. The reversal is that we remember Cayce for predicting the war, but we forget that he also predicted the choice. The future, in his view, was not fixed. It was a reflection of collective consciousness. The sixth prediction, convergence of communications. In 1929, Cayce gave a reading about the future of the communications industry. He predicted the convergence of large telecommunications companies, AT&T International Telephone and Telegraph, Western Union, Westinghouse, and radio. He said, these combinations in communicative forces will take place. Here is the scientific validation. The mergers he predicted have come to pass. Today, a handful of companies control the flow of information across the entire planet. The contradiction is that Cayce saw this convergence as a tool for unity, a way to spread knowledge and understanding. But we now have the most connected world in history, and yet we are more divided than ever. The technology fulfilled the prophecy, but the spirit did not. The reversal is that the very tools of connection he foresaw are now the primary vectors for misinformation and tribalism. The seventh prediction, La Nina and El Nino. In 1926, Cayce made a connection between temperature changes in deep ocean currents and weather changes. He said, as the heat or cold in the various parts of the earth is radiated off, this in its action changes the currents or streams of the ocean. At the time, this was a radical idea. Here is the scientific validation. Cayce described what we now know as La Nina and El Nino, the cyclical warming and cooling of the Pacific Ocean that drives global weather patterns. Scientists today use satellite data and ocean buoys to track these patterns. The contradiction is that Cayce saw the weather not as a random force, but as a response, a reaction to human activity and cosmic cycles. The Earth is responding to us, and we are responding to the Earth. The final unsettling reversal is that Cayce's prediction was not just about the science. It was about the consequences. He warned that these changes in ocean currents were part of a larger planetary shift, rebalancing of the Earth systems. Edgar Cayce gave over 14,000 readings in his lifetime. He spoke of past lives, of ancient civilizations, of future events. He was called a prophet, a mystic, a charlatan, a fraud. But the data does not lie. His predictions have come true with a frequency that defies statistical probability. 7 predictions. 7 confirmations. Scientists can no longer deny the patterns. They can dismiss the method. They can question the source, but they cannot ignore the results. The world Cayce described is the world we are living in. The changes he foresaw are the changes we are measuring. The warnings he gave are the warnings we are ignoring. He said the purpose of prophecy was not to predict the future, but to change it. He believed that if people knew what was coming, they could alter their course. But we did not listen. We archived his readings. We called them curiosities. And now, as the magnetic field weakens, as the climate shifts, as the old systems collapse, we are forced to ask, what else did he see? What other warnings did we miss? The data is there in the archives, in the readings, in the patterns. The question is whether we will look before it is too late. The Earth's magnetic shield is vanishing, and we were told it would. Consider the sheer audacity of the claims. A man self-educated, lying in a trance, dictating the future of global finance, world war, and deep ocean science. The scientific community demands peer-reviewed evidence, repeatable experiments, and verifiable data. Cayce offered none of that. He offered only a voice from the void, a whisper from the collective unconscious. Yet, the facts on the ground, the satellite data, the archaeological finds, the medical breakthroughs, they all line up with his whispers. This is the ultimate contradiction that scientists must face. Their own data is validating a source they refuse to acknowledge. The magnetic field decay is not a theory. It is a measurement. The Dead Sea Scrolls are not a myth. They are a physical artifact. The diagnostic power of blood is not a dream. It is a daily reality in every hospital. The evidence is overwhelming, but the origin remains inexplicable. The narrative of the modern world is one of linear progress, of science conquering superstition. Cayce's readings shatter that narrative. They suggest a cyclical history, a deep memory embedded in the planet itself. His warnings about Atlantis were not just historical anecdotes. They were a mirror held up to our own technological hubris. He described a civilization destroyed by its own power source, a giant crystal that overloaded and caused the continent to sink. Scientists dismissed the crystal as fantasy, but they cannot dismiss the fact that we are now grappling with the existential threat of our own runaway technology, from artificial intelligence to nuclear proliferation. The fear is the same. The pattern is the same. The only difference is the name of the continent. We are living in the age of Cayce's fulfillment. The convergence of communications he foresaw has created a global brain, a nervous system for humanity. But this system is now riddled with anxiety, misinformation, and division. The tool for unity has become the engine of tribalism. The financial markets he predicted would crash due to greed continue to operate on the same unstable foundation. The weather patterns he linked to deep ocean currents are now accelerating into climate chaos. Every single one of his 7 major prophecies has not just come true, but has become a defining crisis of the 21st century. The question is no longer whether he was right. The question is why. Was he a conduit to the Akashic records? A library of all time and space? Was he a psychic anomaly? A glitch in the matrix of human consciousness? Or was he simply a man who understood the fundamental, unchanging patterns of human nature and planetary cycles? The scientific mind demands a mechanism, a formula, a repeatable process. Cayce offers only the result, and the result is undeniable. The final haunting implication is that if the first 7 predictions were accurate, what about the others? What about the prophecies of massive geological upheaval, of the sinking of New York and the rising of Atlantis? Scientists have always dismissed these as the ravings of a madman. But now, as the magnetic shield weakens, as the poles shift, as the oceans warm, the line between prophecy and reality is blurring. The Earth is a living system, and it is responding. The data is screaming. And the only voice that seems to have understood the message was the one we chose to ignore. We are standing at the precipice of the changes he foretold. The world is waiting for a scientific explanation, a rational formula to solve the crisis. But perhaps the answer is not in the formula. Perhaps the answer is in the choice. Cayce said the future is not fixed. It is a reflection of the collective heart. The final contradiction is that the man who predicted the future also gave us the power to change it. But we are running out of time. The magnetic shield is vanishing. The data is in. The choice is ours. The Earth's magnetic shield is vanishing. And we were told it would. The scientific community is trapped in a paradox of its own making. They must either accept that a man who claimed to read the Akashic records was right about the most fundamental shifts in our planet systems, or they must find a way to explain why their own hard-won data perfectly aligns with his fantasies. The South Atlantic anomaly, the very dent in our magnetic field, is not just a technical glitch for satellites. It is a physical manifestation of Cayce's 1936 prophecy. The magnetic field, our planetary cocoon, is not just weakening. It is shifting its allegiance, moving its protective focus. This is not a gradual, gentle process. It is a violent, chaotic reordering of the forces that make life on Earth possible. And it is happening now. The Essenes, once a historical footnote, are now central to understanding the spiritual landscape of the first century. Cayce's readings provided a roadmap to a lost civilization, a secret society that held knowledge of healing and prophecy. The Dead Sea Scrolls, the ultimate scientific proof, are a silent testament to his accuracy. They force the question: if Cayce could access the past with such precision, what does that imply about his access to the future? The same mind that saw the Essenes' daily life also saw the collapse of the global economy. The medical world, proud of its linear progression from leeches to gene therapy, must confront the fact that one of its most fundamental diagnostic tools, the simple blood test, was predicted by a man who had no medical training, decades before the technology existed. It is a humbling contradiction. The Theranos scandal, a dark echo of the prophecy, only highlights the power of the original vision. The vision was true. The execution was flawed. The final chilling realization is that Cayce's prophecies are not isolated events. They are interconnected threads in a single, vast tapestry. The greed that led to the 1929 crash is the same greed that fuels the climate crisis, the same greed that drives the technological convergence into a tool of control. The choice he spoke of, the choice to change the collective heart, is the only variable that remains. The data is fixed. The pattern is set. The only thing that can break the cycle is a conscious, collective decision to listen to the warnings of the past, warnings that were delivered to us by a man who slept and saw. The Earth's magnetic shield is vanishing, and we were told it would. The question is, what are we going to do now that we know?